5 Ouagadougou. The city is still asleep, but 17 secret buildings are under siege. Inside, the charity, the development center, is just a front. Over 2 million digital records, names, faces, fingerprints, even voices were seized in a matter of hours. And here's the untold truth. In the 21st century, sovereignty is not protected by borders or armies, but by data. If the heartbeat of a nation is copied and sold, is it still free? Burkina Faso, under Ibrahim Traoré, is facing not soldiers, but algorithms and an invisible empire. According to official reports broadcast across African news outlets, on a Thursday morning before sunrise, security forces in Burkina Faso carried out a coordinated strike on 17 facilities in the capital city of Ouagadougou. What appeared to be aid organizations and development hubs were exposed as nodes in a foreign surveillance network. Investigators uncovered servers linked to overseas IP addresses, warehouses filled with biometric databases, and encrypted communications traced back to Israel. More than 2 million digital profiles of Burkinabe citizens, including fingerprints, call records, and even cabinet discussions, were seized and secured. The operation was codenamed Clear Sight. At dawn, the first wave of soldiers moved with precision through Ouagadougou's narrow streets. Locals peeked from shuttered windows, confused by the sudden presence of armored trucks and men in black uniforms. To them, it looked like war had arrived at their doorsteps. But Captain Ibrahim Traoré, now the president of Burkina Faso, knew it was not war, it was liberation. Inside one of the seized compounds, investigators pulled open heavy steel cabinets to find rows of servers humming with stolen lives. Faces flickered across monitors, children, elders, market vendors, school teachers, biometric scans, national ID numbers, health records, 2 million fragments of human existence, stripped of dignity and stored for someone else's profit. "Look at this," one officer whispered, holding up a drive. "It's every voter registration since 2012. Traoré stood silent, his jaw tight. To him, the discovery was not just about espionage, it was about betrayal. For years, contracts had been signed in bright conference halls, applauded by Western diplomats and development agencies. They had promised progress, connectivity, modernization. But here, in the ruins of secrecy, the truth was exposed. The price of modernization was surveillance. In another location, only blocks from the Ministry of Education, investigators uncovered maps of mineral-rich regions marked with red annotations and export routes. Gold veins, manganese deposits, uranium fields, catalogued with military precision and stamped on the corner of one file. Coordinates cross-checked with data centers in Tel Aviv. The revelation spread through the command center like wildfire. Burkina Faso had not been merely a target, it had been a testing ground for a larger empire of control. Traoré's voice broke the silence. They thought Africa would never see, but today, we open our eyes. By mid-morning, news of the raids rippled through Ouagadougou like a shockwave. Citizens poured into the streets, whispering in disbelief. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Traders in the market spoke of betrayal. 2 million profiles, one man said, shaking his head. That is not data, that is our lives. President Ibrahim Traoré convened his council in the National Palace. Maps, seized hard drives, and intercepted files were spread across the long mahogany table. Intelligence officers detailed how these networks had burrowed deep into Burkina Faso's digital arteries, telecom hubs, election databases, even health systems. For 15 years, foreign hands had gripped the nation's pulse. This is not theft, Traoré said firmly. This is occupation without soldiers. His words carried weight, echoing through the chamber. Ministers exchanged glances, some fearful, others emboldened. They knew that exposing this operation would not simply anger one nation, it would provoke a storm of global confrontation. Yet Traoré did not flinch. Outside, the people were restless. Social media lit up with anger, memes of broken chains, and graffiti scrawled across city walls. Our data, our choice. For the first time in decades, ordinary Burkinabe felt that sovereignty was not a distant concept. It was personal, in their pockets, on their phones, in their very fingerprints. That night, Traoré addressed the nation. Cameras rolled as he stood against a backdrop of the Burkinabe flag. His voice was calm, yet searing. Africa is no longer your laboratory. We are not your test subjects. Our independence is not a relic of the past, it is a shield for our future. The broadcast reverberated across Africa news networks. In Bamako, in Niamey, in Conakry, citizens gathered around radios and screens, listening to the words of a young leader who had dared to seize back what was stolen. The battle for sovereignty had begun not only in the streets, but in the cloud. The following weeks unfolded like a storm building over the savannah. Western embassies scrambled to issue denials. Press briefings in Washington and Paris called the accusations exaggerated, baseless, even fabricated. Yet the evidence on the table, the servers, the contracts, the testimonies was too concrete to dismiss. In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré launched a counter-offensive, but this time not with weapons. He summoned engineers from Ghana, coders from Mali, encryption specialists from South Africa. Together, they formed what was dubbed the Digital Sovereignty Task Force. Their mission: build Africa's first secure data center, a fortress of servers under African soil, powered by solar grids and shielded by homegrown cybersecurity protocols. The construction site quickly became a symbol. Bulldozers carved out the red earth as banners fluttered overhead, bearing a single phrase: Notre data, notre future. Our data, our future. Students volunteered on weekends, carrying bricks, wiring cables, and painting murals of satellites, breaking free from foreign chains. But resistance brewed. Across encrypted channels, mercenary-linked hackers launched cyber attacks, flooding Burkinabe systems with viruses, phishing traps, and Trojan horses. Hospitals found their networks slowed. Banks struggled to process transactions. It was a new kind of war, silent, invisible, yet suffocating. One night, as the council gathered, an urgent alert pierced the room. The task force's firewall had been breached. Files containing voter registration data, millions of names and identities, were in danger of being siphoned abroad. The room went silent. Traoré rose slowly, his uniform illuminated by the dim light of the monitors. "They want us to believe we are defenseless," he said. "But we are not. Tonight, Burkina Faso defends itself not with bullets, but with code." The engineers worked feverishly, fingers racing across keyboards. Alarms blared as red lines traced intrusion attempts. In the dim-lit room, sweat dripped, hearts pounded. Then, as dawn's first light crept through the palace windows, a message flashed across the screen: intrusion repelled. Cheers erupted. Some wept openly. In that moment, the people of Burkina Faso had won their first cyber battle, and Traoré knew the war for sovereignty had entered a new era, one fought not on battlefields, but in the silent heart of machines. News of the cyber victory spread like wildfire. In the markets of Ouagadougou, traders told the story as if it were a folk legend. Mothers whispered it to their children at bedtime, how Africa's sons and daughters fought shadows in the machines and emerged victorious. But the empire was not done. Weeks later, a new threat surfaced: an insidious campaign of digital disinformation. Anonymous accounts, fueled by foreign intelligence, spread lies across social media. That Traoré had sold the nation's data to Russia, that the new data center was a surveillance tool, that the alliance with Mali and Niger was crumbling. Screens lit up with chaos. Protests sparked in small towns, manipulated by false rumors. A wedge was being driven into the fragile unity of the people. Traoré responded not with censorship, but with transparency. He called for a live broadcast from the very heart of the new data center. Cameras rolled as he walked through its corridors, rows of humming servers glowing like blue fire. He spoke directly to the nation: "These machines do not belong to me. They belong to you, the farmer in Kaya, the student in Bobo, the nurse in Banfora. They do not spy on you. They protect you. They keep your future safe from those who would erase it. And for hours, citizens flooded social media with messages of support, drowning out the falsehoods. Volunteers began fact-checking rumors in real time, posting corrections with the same zeal as warriors sharpening spears before battle. The digital battlefield was no longer hidden. It had become a public square, defended by the people themselves. One night, a young coder from the task force approached Traoré. "President," she said quietly, "we are no longer fighting just for Burkina Faso. Other nations are watching. They ask if we will teach them." Traoré placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we must. Sovereignty shared is sovereignty multiplied." From that moment, the project expanded. Delegations from Guinea, Tanzania, and the Congo arrived, eager to learn how to build their own firewalls, their own digital fortresses. The movement had grown beyond Burkina Faso, and in the dim glow of server lights, Traoré smiled. What began as defense had become a seed that could grow into something greater, an African digital union, immune to empires, rooted in self-determination. The day was heavy with heat, the kind that presses on the shoulders and makes the air itself feel like stone. In Ouagadougou's Grand Assembly Hall, representatives from across Africa gathered. Flags lined the walls: Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Guinea, Tanzania, Congo, and more. The hall buzzed with expectation, but also with doubt. Could this gathering truly mark the birth of something new, or was it another dream doomed to fracture? Ibrahim Traoré stood at the center, not on a raised podium, but on the same level as his peers. He wore no lavish suit, only his familiar camouflage uniform. The choice was deliberate, a reminder that this alliance was not about prestige, but survival. He began not with speeches, but with silence. He let the murmurs die down, let the weight of the moment settle like dust after a storm. And then he spoke. "Brothers, sisters, for centuries, Africa's treasures were taken because we were divided. First it was our gold, then our land. Now it is our data, our voices, our minds. The battlefield has changed, but the war has not." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded gravely, others shifted uncomfortably. Traoré's voice grew stronger. Last month, Burkina Faso stood alone against a digital onslaught. Servers crashed, banks froze, rumors flooded every phone. They thought we would kneel. Instead, we stood, not because we are stronger, but because we were prepared to defend our sovereignty. On a massive screen behind him, images flickered. The glowing servers, the task force of young coders, citizens fact-checking rumors in real time. Proof, not promises. Now, he continued, we have a choice. Each of us can build small walls, fragile and isolated. Or we can build one fortress, vast and unbreakable. A digital union of Africa. Silence. Then a skeptical delegate from an oil-rich nation spoke up. "And what of the cost, Traoré? Firewalls, satellites, data centers, these require billions. Do you expect us to bankrupt our nations chasing shadows in the cloud?" Traoré did not flinch. He gestured to the crowd. "Look around you. We already pay the price. Every day, billions leak out of Africa through manipulated markets, stolen data, and foreign platforms that harvest our people's lives. We are already bleeding. I propose we stop the bleeding." A younger leader from East Africa leaned forward. "And who controls this union? Another empire in new clothes?" Traoré smiled faintly. "No one controls it. That is the point. We design it as a federation of equals. Each nation guards its own data, its own people. But together, we share the tools, the shields, the knowledge. Imagine African satellites circling the skies, African algorithms securing our elections, African platforms telling our stories without censorship from Silicon Valley or Brussels." The hall grew restless. Some whispered, others scribbled notes. The idea was vast, almost unbelievable. And then, a moment of theater. Traoré raised a black tablet in his hand. "This," he said, "is our prototype, a Burkina Faso operating system coded by our own youth, secure, independent, not perfect, but ours." Imagine if every child in Africa grew up learning this system not as consumers of foreign apps, but as creators of their own digital world. Gasps, heads turned. For the first time, the room leaned forward. Suddenly, a commotion at the entrance. A courier rushed in, whispering urgently to one of the aides. The aide hesitated, then handed Traoré a phone. His jaw tightened. He raised his eyes to the hall. "Even as we speak," he announced, "foreign hackers are targeting this summit. They fear what we might build." The hall fell into stunned silence. For a heartbeat, history seemed to hold its breath. Then Traoré lifted the tablet, tapped a command, and the giant screen lit up with real-time visuals. Attempted intrusions bouncing off firewalls like arrows shattering against stone. The Burkina Faso prototype was holding. The hall erupted not in fear, but in thunderous applause. Delegates stood, clapping, shouting, some even raising their fists. The skeptics were silent now, drowned out by the roar of something larger than caution. Hope. In that moment, the African Digital Union was no longer a dream. It was a declaration. Outside, in the streets of Ouagadougou, crowds watched the broadcast on giant screens. They cheered not only for Traoré, but for themselves, for the farmers, students, and workers who had fought in this unseen war. The city trembled with chants. Sovereignty, unity, Africa. Ah! As the sun set, painting the sky in crimson and gold, Traoré allowed himself a brief smile. He knew the road ahead would be treacherous. Empires would not sit idle. Attacks would intensify. But for the first time, Africa was not just reacting. It was building. And in the hum of servers and the roar of the people, the future whispered a single truth: the empire's time was ending. The age of African sovereignty had begun. The night sky over Ouagadougou pulsed with the glow of the new sovereignty data center, its servers alive with energy, its engineers moving like guardians of a sacred flame. But beneath the hum of progress, a storm struck. Not lightning, but wires. The empire unleashed a blackout across the Sahel, networks collapsing, hospitals cut off, planes grounded, schools erased from screens. Inside the control room, Traoré stood firm. This was not merely sabotage, it was a declaration. "You will not build a world without us." "Report," he demanded. Maps bled red as an analyst explained. Every nation that dared whisper support for sovereignty was under fire. Traoré answered with resolve, "Then we answer as one." Across Burkina Faso, the sovereignty shield came alive. Farmers typed commands on solar laptops. Students rerouted traffic through secret links. Teachers, mechanics, and villagers became warriors of a new front line. What was meant to collapse instead multiplied. One node became thousands, sparks became fire. By midnight, the empire's offensive stalled. Lights returned, nurses wept, children cheered. Africa had not fallen, it had risen. Days later, the world's eyes turned to Ouagadougou, where leaders gathered not Western envoys, but African engineers, coders, ministers. Traoré declared, "Sovereignty is not theory, it is practice. We defended ourselves not with weapons, but with unity. This is the blueprint, not dependency, but freedom." Thunderous applause shook the hall. Murals appeared in the streets, painting a continent reborn. Yet in private, Traoré warned his ministers, "This victory is only the beginning. The empire will return. Our answer is to build faster than they can sabotage and teach every child that the internet belongs to them." Weeks later, the summit broadcast echoed across continents. Traoré's words cut through borders. "For too long, they have stolen our minerals, dictated our politics, and invaded our very minds. Tonight, Africa answers, no more." Crowds roared. Phones lit up with digital sovereignty. From remote villages to great capitals, The cry spread, "No more." Holding a flash drive aloft, Traoré delivered the blow. "Here is the evidence of their infiltration and the blueprint of our defense. We release it to the world. Let their own people ask, why?" The empire's lies collapsed, and in their place, a new vision rose, a digital, non-aligned movement. "Stand with us," Traoré called, "for your children's future. The time is now." The silence that followed was not hesitation, but history turning its page.